and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello and welcome to the Exploring Death podcast. I'm Lisa Jones, your host, and today I have with me Jim Bruton. In October 2016, Jim was flying one of his historical reproduction airplanes over the Connecticut countryside. Suddenly, he lost power and crashed into a forest, rupturing his lungs, breaking all of his ribs, and shattering his right leg. LifeStar helicoptered him to the Hartford Hospital, where the surgeons prepared him for a day-long operation by putting him into a week-long coma. It was then that he had his near-death experience and went to a place called the In-Between. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, Lisa. How are you today?
I am wonderful, and I'm so excited to have you here on the Exploring Death podcast, as we had met at the IANS conference just this past August, September, and it was so funny. We were just talking about this before we started recording, is the coincidences that happen once you've had an out-of-body or shared death or near-death experience, because it just seems like they happen all the time, and yet we're continually surprised by it.
It's so true. It's as if having a spiritually transformative experience like an NDE fine-tunes you back into the fabric of the universe and kind of gets you back on track so that synchronicities become more a norm than an exception.
That's right, because I remember we were trying, or somehow you knew me because you're somehow related to my best friend Golden, right? And so
she's my cousin. Absolutely. And I was already a fan of yours. I was listening to your podcast before the conference. So it was really nice to see you and meet you in person. And, I said, oh, by the way, we have a common connection. And of course, I've been out to California to visit her recently, and we talked about you, and you were going over there to visit her soon. So looks like you all are doing some great things together.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun on our getting the real ones. Group that we've got on Facebook, which is really fun. So anyway, I am so excited to talk to you about your near-death experience. And wow, that is traumatic. I mean, I do have to say my shared death experience, I didn't have to go through the physical trauma that you did with ruptured lungs, all of your ribs broken, and a shattered leg. So tell us about that day and then, talk about what happened with your near-death.
Sure. Thank you. I've always been a fan of early aviation, and I used to travel a lot. And then when I settled down from that, my wife said, why don't you build this airplane you've always been talking about? So I built my first one, and that was fine, and I sold it. And I built the second one, which is a tiny little, called a flying flea, 1930s reproduction. It kind of looks like something out of a Disney cartoon. It's very small and whimsical looking. It looks like a soapbox derby car with, an engine right in front of you. And I was out on my second test flight, and I didn't really like the way it handled in the first flight, but I thought, well, I'm a pretty good pilot. I'll go up and master it. So I took off and flew around a little bit, and I did lose my engine, and there was really no way to get back to the airfield. So I was actually aiming for a small lake in a Boy Scout camp, because that was the only place that had no trees. All right, fine, let's go for there. But I overshot the bank by about 10 feet, and then imagine soapbox derby car crashing into big tree trunks at 70 miles an hour, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, the throttle quadrant that I had my hand on is made out of aviation grade steel, and it is bent like a pretzel. And there's no way normally I could do that. So I keep it kind of like over in my man bar area, as a little trophy. And what else are you going to do, right?
I was going to say, and how did you not die? I mean, what do you attribute that to?
By the grace of God, and only that, to be honest. I mean, it has to be. Luckily, so this Boy Scout camp, this was October, it's closed. But a man used to like to kind of sneak in and go fishing. Well, he's a retired police officer, so everybody was happy to have him there, safest place around. He happened to be fishing, and he saw the whole thing. And he ran over. He saw I was in terrible shape, and he kind of propped me up because I was foaming blood now because I had no functioning lungs. And he said he normally left his cell phone in his truck a half a mile away. That day, for some reason, he had it on him. I might not have survived if he had to run half a mile there and half a mile back. So he kept me propped up until LifeStar, the helicopter, landed as close as they could nearby. Luckily, there was a clearing. And they pretty quickly, I was going to say they cut me out of the cockpit, but it was really only my seatbelt. Literally, when the plane stopped crashing, there was no plane left around me. It was all matchsticks, except the part behind me I was seatbelted to. So they put me in the helicopter, flew me to Hartford. The trauma team there was waiting for me. And by the way, just special shout out to that entire hospital team. Amazing, amazing, amazing. If anyone in Connecticut or in this area ever wanted to go into a medical career, I'd say go there, even if you have to pay them to work there. They're just incredible. So anyway, so by the time my wife and oldest daughter got there, a couple hours later, they were informed that there were going to be multiple 6+ hour operations coming up over the next few days. And some only had like a 2% chance of success. And they said we could lose him at any time. My daughter later told me we started the grieving process then.
Wow.
We assumed that, so, but I was in a breathing machine. I had tubes going in and out every possible place and to support my life in every way. And they finally told my wife, we should just put him in a coma for a week while we're doing this. And she agreed. So literally the moment they put me into a coma and then I kind of went to sleep here, I instantly woke up in the in-between. It was like I teleported. And that's a picture of it behind me on the wall. So to pick up right there, it's like I literally teleported, and it was as if it was a post-apocalyptic New York City, if you will, just this landscape, nothing recognizable like New York, but it was just as if everything had been destroyed and was in ruins. And I was like high up on a terrace of a tall building, and everything was gray, as if it were concrete. And the sky, as you can see behind me, it was just super dark gray. The clouds were storm heavy, like they were just getting ready to cut loose with a hailstorm or a tornado or something. I mean, it was like standing right in front of a tidal wave. It was so, like, danger was so imminent, if you will. But it was absolutely silent there. Silent, silent, silent. And I felt, for some reason, nauseous. I got this wave of nausea pass through me. I said, wow, I don't think I can stand this. And the moment I said that, I heard this light clacking like gears. And I looked around, and to my left was that large sort of egg-shaped sculpture near me. I would say it was about 3 or 4 stories high if I had to give it some dimension. And it was within it, there were all these tiny little gears moving. And what's interesting, I had never seen gears shaped like this. They're called sector gears. You see them in clocks. They're a partial arc of a gear. Normally we think of a gear all the way around. This was like a part of an arc because they sweep back and forth. Well, in this case, they were moving all around. I went over there and looked through that lattice work at them, and they were kind of ghost-like. I mean, they were actually passing through each other. And I looked and I said, like out loud, like, what is this? And it said, this is the future birthing into the now. And I said, and it said, this is the process of becoming. And I just kept watching it. And I remember saying, what's happening now as it moves around? It says, each gear is the probability of a thought, word, or deed in your future. And then the gears stopped, and I don't know why I knew I could do this. I just reached through the lattice to touch them, because some appeared more solid, some appeared, like I said, more ghostly. And at some point I touched one, and I got this really huge shock of nausea in my stomach. And instinctively, I grabbed it and just pulled it out through the lattice and threw it away. And then all the gears swung around before. And I said, what's happening now? It said, your future has to reset itself around an event that will not be there now. And I said, how did I know I could do that? And it said, why else are you here? I mean,
Wow.
just everything was just mind blowing. And I said, what is this place? Where am I? I said, you're in the in-between. And I said, in between what? And it literally said everything, between the future and the past and life and death. And I was, more confused, and it said, you're standing within the eternity of a single moment. And I said, what does that mean? And it said, well, can you remember the body? Can you remember the body to which you belong? And I literally do remember standing there with this blankest, probably expression on my face, with no memory of this place at all, no attachment, no memory. If someone had come up and said, if you stay here any longer, you can't go back, I would have said, go back where? To your family. What family? Gone. I was depersonalized down to zero. Everything was gone. I was aware only of being a conscious being. That's it.
Wow. And
And
did you have a physicality to you, or it was just a thought?
I would say I did, but it's not like I remember, like, I'm in there reaching around.
Mm-hmm.
I was aware of reaching around, but I wasn't aware of seeing my hands. So
Okay.
it could have just been an oversight. Possibly if I had something like some type of regression where I could go back and experience it again, I might pick up more details. And that's something I am exploring. Anyway, it told me, now you see how the past is dust. Yeah, so okay. And that was such a subtle truth to my experience. I'll come back to that in a second. So anyway, so I just kept reaching it through there every time I stopped, understanding now that I'm able to remove things in my future that are to my spiritual detriment. I reached back in there, pulled it, tossed it away. Again, the machine recalibrates. And I just did that over and over and over again. And I remember one time I kind of jokingly said, where are the gears that feel good? And it said, you're not here to feel good. And a lot of people might go, oh, it just meant you're here to do work and you've got a limited amount of time. You're on a mission. Stay focused. I got it. So I remember one time I did notice a large pile of gears growing, and I said, "This does this mean I'm going to live shorter?" Because here are all my futures I'm throwing out, and it said, "Your number of breaths are already counted. I will worry about your last one." And I don't know, it's just so amazing. And at one time I said, what am I missing here in my lack of understanding? And it said, what is clearly before you, grace. No one deserves salvation. It has to be asked for, but it comes at the cost of the world that separates us. I said, okay.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I said, it's as if I said, I feel guilty in a way because it's not like I'm able to make these decisions about what's bad for my spiritual development using some moral compass or a mantra or some piece of scripture. I said, I'm using pain. And that's when it said, all choices have unintended consequences, and pain can be your guide. And I also realized later on that when you're in that split second, and this has come since through further experiences, when you're really, really present, it's hard to process information linearly. You tend to process it non-linearly because that's all about observing patterns versus step A, B, C, and D. And honestly, I came out one middle of the night from meditation, and I realized I couldn't think linearly at all. Sometimes I would, don't laugh. Sometimes I'd like pick up my iPhone and play a little spider solitaire or something just to kind of do something repetitive in my mind so I can go back to sleep. And I was doing it, but I couldn't even remember what I had just done or anticipate what I would do next because I was so present. And I just thought, this is the downside of being present. I said, it'd be like taking an amnesiac to a movie because you wouldn't remember the last frame you just saw or anticipate the one that's coming. So
Well,
if I
I
ever
love that you
decide to do,
say that because living here in Maui, I found that to be very true. People will say, so what did you do last night? And I literally will just stand there with a blank look on my face. And it takes me, like sometimes I can't even remember, because I'm so present here. I'm so just in the moment and just taking one step at a time. And so I love hearing that because I think that's an after effect of having an out of body spiritually transformative experience is that you become much more present, or you're able to.
it really becomes your standing state.
Right.
And it's as if you're more conscious of having to depart from that to engage with the world than you are being in the world and having to work to engage in that. It's just very
Exactly.
natural, you know?
Exactly.
But a couple other things that were important that it said, I would really like to say. And I said one time, I said, it's as if this place was designed that I could do one thing and one thing only with like very little chance of messing it up. And it said, if those with choices make poor use of them, then offering fewer possibilities could be called mercy.
Mm.
I get chills now saying it. I mean, those words I remember are the truest words I will ever speak in my entire life.
Absolutely.
There are
Can you
no
repeat
true, I
those?
will never
Yeah.
speak more truth than that. I'm sorry.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Well, can you repeat that again? Because I think it's so profound and so deep.
sure. If those with choices make poor use of them, then offering fewer possibilities could be called mercy.
Mm. Wow. That is just so powerful. And I find that in my own life too. At times when I have unlimited options, it just becomes overwhelming and then paralyzing. So many times fewer options is mercy because
So true.
you don't take action when you're allowed to have unlimited.
You almost freeze. Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
And the other thing is honestly, as my time wrapped up there, um, I remember it said directly to me in these words, it said, and I did, and I had no idea what was going on at the time. It's not like I said, hey, I'm having a near-death experience. I had no clue. But it's interesting how the words I'm about to say are almost 100% consistent across everybody else's NDEs in one way or another. It said, everything is interconnected. It said, and pay attention to your relationships. Be gentle with others as I am gentle with you. And I remember saying, you know, because of the waves of novelty and the way they look, I said, what's gentle about all this? And it literally said, you prayed for something for which being here is an answer. And now the man who fell from the sky is not the same who flew into it.
Oh, wow. That's amazing that you have such a recollection of these words. Many NDEers don't have much memory, if any, of what was told to them. So what do you attribute that to?
You know, it's interesting. I went to a therapist for a little while, and it's really hard to find a therapist. I'm sure everybody talks about it. I mean, you can go on the different websites that say these are NDE friendly, and that's great, but it depends on where you live too. Um, and I always thought, this guy thought I was full of it or something. Like maybe you're hiding behind a midlife crisis with this or something. And when I said what I just shared with you, he actually said, I think what you're doing, it might be a little bit like channeling. He
Mm.
actually acknowledged that. And I was so surprised and so touched and actually honored because he was a skeptic, and that's okay. That is totally okay. It keeps us honest, right? But I also noticed that it was when I came out. So when I came out of the coma in this hospital, it literally took me about a week. I mean, I'm coming out with anesthesia and painkillers and still in physical shock. And honestly, I would say I probably don't have any. I know I don't have any memory from 2 days before my crash. I had to go back and find an email with a timestamp that I recognized, and it was from 2 days before. And when I came out of the coma, I would say it was a good solid week before I knew anything. And by then, they'd already relocated me to a rehabilitation hospital. And but as I'm coming to is as if I had this endless video loop going through my head of the experience I've just described. And with each pass, there was more detail. Or you could say with each pass, I was coming more out of my cloud, And it was just this layering effect. But I realized too, this is actually how I work on problems. And I say problems like technical problems or IT problems. Now, I just keep rolling it over and over in my head, looking for that clarity. It's kind of like walking around a problem and looking for different ways into it. And again, kind of a nonlinear approach, really. And the first person I shared it with, I had obviously 3 shifts, 8-hour shifts of nurses. And there was this one young one, she was totally the A-team. Her name was Jen. I'm calling her out. She was fantastic. And then one day I realized she's just kind of hanging out here because we talk about life, the universe, and everything, and it's cool. And I said, listen, I just have to share something with you if you don't mind. And she said, okay. And I told her about my NDE. And right in there, she started crying. I said, why are you crying? She said, I don't want you to die. And I said, why? You see death every day. And she said, I swear, she said, because you're magical. And I said, how do you mean? And she said, well, everybody here in the hospital, they have one doctor and they may have 15 minutes of their time a day. You have 3 to 5 doctors in here for over an hour. And I snoop. I walk by the door. What are they talking about? And you're just talking about life and all kinds of things, but not about necessarily your. And one of them wants you to be in business and has you on international conference calls with your leg in the air in this cage. And that's when I started to understand, and since then have confirmed, how a lot of people who have these experiences come back with something a little more enhanced than when they went. Like PMH Atwater said one time, if you weren't psychic before, you will be. And if you were, you'll be more so. Mine was empathy, that connection with people. And sometimes it's been so strong, I just have not been able to go into an entire room. I mean, as if there was a barrier. And I just said, can't do it. Can't go in there. And I don't know exactly, I mean, I have an idea what was going on, but I'm not quite sure why I couldn't go in there. But that empathy has continued to express itself. I mean, obviously it creates a fabric upon which you live in the world, in terms of how you consider people, even people who are, like ticking you off, you just you start to perceive things from their side as well. And anyway, everybody says you've changed so fundamentally after one of these experiences, and my kids have acknowledged that, my wife has acknowledged it, everybody, and that's okay. So anyway, I was in the hospital for a few more weeks, and continued to get stronger, and a few people came by to see me, and it was great. And then it was time to go home, and when I came home, I slept on a pull-out on the main floor just to kind of get my strength up, butt hop up the stairs to the shower and things like that. And anyway, it was a little while later, as I was continuing to start writing my story, my NDE story, that's when I started to realize about the after effects. And we've all heard of those. There are all kinds of after effects, but certainly I can totally verify the craziness with electric devices and electronic devices. Absolutely. I mean, within a very short period, and we live in a fairly new house, I suddenly had to replace my entire HVAC system and the damper motors in the ductwork that, redirect the air. And I got the people back out. First of all, I had to buy a new HVAC system. And then I got now here to look at the motors, and I said, what happened? And they were here whole day, and all they could come up with, power surge. At the same time, my microwave blew up, of course, light bulbs. And now we get in. One time I was warming my car up, and I was talking to PMH Atwater, and right there I felt the shift in my energy. And she said, yeah, our energies are connecting. I said, I can feel that. And I'm a very down to earth guy. It's not like I'm a woo woo, and that was exactly at 4:40 p.m. So we hung up the call at 5. I go to get in my car, and there are 2 clocks in my car, one the radio, one the dash. The one on the radio was normal time. And again, my car had already been running. The one in the dash was frozen at 4:40.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, it's on in between time. The other one's on normal time. And that's never happened before, never happened since. And then when I was about on electronic, I'll end it with this, is on my way down to visit PMH Atwater in Virginia. I was going to see my mom in Charlotte from Connecticut. I was about 20 minutes out, and using Waze on my phone to direct me to her house, and it says about 20 minutes out. All of a sudden, Facebook Messenger pops up on my phone, and it's a woman who's an NDE friend, and she was texting me saying, I don't know why, but I'm thinking about you. I said, well, it's because I'm about 20 minutes from visiting PMH. And all of a sudden, when people are typing a message to send you with Facebook Messenger, you'll see the little dots. It's telling you to wait and see. So while it's doing that, my text field, my hands are on the wheel. I am not in dictation mode with the radio on. All of a sudden, my text field filled in by itself. And it literally said, "Thank you for being a kind and loving person."
Wow.
Someone said, "I guess your spirit guides know how to use the phone." I don't know. But I mean, I almost went off the road because I had no idea what I was about to say and send that I would never be able to recover from if it was crazy. But anyway, and then a couple of weeks later, I was put in touch with this researcher who's Hungarian, living in Austria. She was getting ready to do a new research project on NDEs. And the next morning, I got an email that appeared to be from her with, the timestamp, the date, everything was right. But the body of the email was from a good friend of mine 11 years before, telling me where to find people up here in the Northeast who are on our spiritual path. So all I can say is 2 spiritually inclined emails merged 11 years apart in a folder that didn't exist until the day before. And I've talked to all the Cisco experts, and no one can explain how that could have happened.
Wow.
This becomes, and I told, PMH, she just laughed, said, "Yeah, this is just the beginning." So
Yeah, the new normal.
Yeah, so when we talk about sort of being realigned through one of these experiences, these are just some of the ways in which we see it. It's amazing.
Exactly. I'm curious. I just had one of my listeners email me and ask about premonitions. And I'm curious if you've had any premonitions before your incident or after. I had a very, very real premonition about my mother. I didn't know exactly what, but it was, I had been visiting her in Hawaii. She was there for a month, and and I went to visit her. And so on my way out the door, it was almost like I walked through a threshold, and as soon as I walked forward, it was like I just had this knowing something was going to happen to her and I would be back. And I couldn't even understand. I mean, it was almost like this thought bomb went off in my head. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't even say anything to her about it. But sure enough, a week later, she called and said, "Oh, I don't want to leave. Tomorrow's the last day. I love it here so much." And an hour later, I got another phone call from my stepdad saying, "Oh my God, your mom's had a stroke. Please come back." And so sure enough, I went back and she ended up dying. But have you had any premonitions? And if so, what do you think that's all about?
Right. Yes. I want to lead into that with one thing. Interestingly, as I was recuperating, someone asked me, on the day you flew, did you have a bad premonition? And I said, the way I would answer that now is, forget premonition. If I had had full knowledge of what was getting ready to happen, would I have had the guts to get into the cockpit anyway?
That's a
Because
great
think about it.
question.
If God's saying, I need to bring you over here for a little one-on-one time for a week, what price is too great to pay? And do you think you're really going to escape it? So I don't know that I still don't know that I can say sure, but I know what the answer should be. And maybe for now, that's enough. In terms of the premonition, I guess so. It's like this instinct, so it's an instinct of when to move, when to wait, when to speak, when to not speak. It might even be enough of a premonition that you'll pause and choose a different word. Because sometimes it's through nuance, sometimes it's through inflection, sometimes it's through body language that you're guided in how to best interact. What's interesting is, in a way, you think about it. I mean, the function of a premonition is to help you be in the right place at the right time, or to not be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's as if, for me, the reality simply becomes that, for example, like, you miss your flight and that's the flight you definitely should have missed. Or that you'll be thinking, oh, I need to go out and something delayed me. The phone rings and it's the magic phone call, something like that. That's how it seems to appear. For example, another way in which it's a little different is, how it's very common in a near-death experience for people to have a life review. I did not have a life review. And yet my experience with these probabilities of my future, they're obviously a fruit of my past. And they sort of got me to the same place that a life review should also give you. A chance to sort of say, okay, I could have done better here. Oh, that was great. To sort of take stock and say, I understand the totality of my actions up until now. Let me sort of, like to say, clean up and go better. Well, that's also where I was taken, but with a slightly different way of saying it, I guess you could say. And so for me, the premonitions are there as well. But the thing about the premonitions is, and this is again what I was shown, is that we're always, moment by moment, standing within a nexus of swirling probabilities, all there for us to choose one. And when we do, that probability wave collapses into a single particle of reality. And that's called choice. And that's called, now. And so I think having a premonition is having a very good feel of that cloud, and also based upon the probability coefficient, if you will, that some are more likely to occur than others. And obviously, in terms of what's in tune with our love for others and our love for our own life, we may tune into some that need to be prevented or countered or prepared for, versus
Right.
it just catching us blind. So I think a lot of it has to do with being very aware of those swirling probabilities.
Yeah, I think you're right. And for me, just, reflecting back on that moment, I think it was a preparation for me. So I wasn't totally jarred. And the woman who emailed, she had a similar premonition that somebody was going to pass, and did, in fact. And so I think it's that skeptic within us about, like, did that really happen? Or, why could I have done something differently to prevent it? Or, there's a guilt factor or something about kind of knowing ahead of time. But I think I love what you say, because I think when we're shown something like that, it's almost like a tip of the cards, right? In a card game, like, here's just a little heads up about what's going to happen. And not that we have to do anything about it, other than just, you're getting a little glimpse of the most likely probability. Because guess what? If nothing had happened to my mom, if nothing had happened to that person, that
Right.
she had a premonition, we would completely dismiss it, and it would probably not even be in our brain thought any longer. It's only because it came true that we're hooked up, or hooked on that whole idea that, oh my God, I saw the future. But I think we have these all the time, but unless they are really giant, kind of life-changing moments, you don't really hook into those feelings.
I've thought a lot about exactly what you're saying, and I said, it's kind of like a transformative experience like this is sort of like you get to go behind the curtain and see how the strings are getting pulled to
Mm-hmm.
make everything happen here, because that realm, being the latent, is what drives this plane, which is the manifest. And a shrug there can be an earthquake here. It's much more powerful, though it's also more sublime. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, it's kind of like the difference between, let's say, people who've been blessed, though they may not think so at the time, to have one of these experiences versus those who don't. It's kind of like, imagine 10 people go to Disney World, right? And 5 of them, the ones who haven't had the experience, are wanting to go on every ride. And sure enough, 5 guides will show up and say, we'll take you anywhere you want to go. Off they go. The other 5 who've had the transformative experience, they're the ones who sort of go behind the scenes with the wrenches and the hammers. And so think about it, like, it's a small world. You could have 5 people on one side seeing all the animatronics and being entertained by it. You have the other 5 on the other side of the ride looking at the valves and the levers and the rods and all that. We're both experiencing the same ride, but from 2 totally different perspectives. And what we're interested in when we're behind the scenes, how do you make things run better? How do
Right.
what needs oiling? What needs replacing? What needs fixing? How can we keep this so that it's working smoothly? And that's the change that comes in essentially walking around from one side to the other.
Wow, I love that idea. That's just such a great, you know, idea of thinking about the ride from the one side, and then what's really going on behind the scenes, because that's exactly, I think, what's going on in the
It
spiritual
seems
world.
like
There's
it.
all the, right. There's all of these amazing opportunities and things that that are being done for us that we're not even aware of on this side, the manifest. Wow. So what would you say your biggest takeaway is from your experience, you know?
Well, a couple things. Certainly just in terms of whatever, whether you want to call it a gift or a tuned up ability or sensitivity people bring back, I would say that that is obviously a very big part of your path. That can be the path through which you have your premonitions or your understanding or your interactivity, both with this world and the world beyond. And like I said, for me, that's empathy. Empathy to the point that I've actually seen it within people. At the holiday party for my wife last year, she invited our two 20, 21-year-old children. They said, of course, best behavior, dress up and all that. Okay, great. When we were there at two different times, I didn't recognize our daughter or our young son. They actually looked like different people for a moment. And then they came, I mean, I knew everybody else, so it's not like, I lost the ability to recognize faces. And I thought about that a little bit. And then a few weeks later, my wife was in a local community play. And she used to be an actress in New York. So now she was doing this around here locally. And as she was walking up to the playhouse, she was carrying all her clothes for her different scene changes. And for a moment, I didn't recognize her. But from the two kids talking to her, I said, I know that's got to be her. I thought, very attractive lady, but she was. And then finally, she started to kind of phase into somebody I recognized. And I realized later that in all three cases, their energy states were heightened. The two kids are going to the mom's big professional party, and she leases jets to the people who can afford that. So you can imagine it's not just, like Joe's truck stop. It's a big deal. And she was going into a play, and this was her returning to a love she had from years ago. And all three people were also not being the people they normally are. The two children had to be grown-ups. My wife had to be another character, and they were already becoming that. And so it's like I was seeing that mapping empathically of what their inner worlds were a little bit like right then. And it's happened a few more times. It happened at IANS too, with one of the speakers there. And I asked her, I said, at that moment, where was your head? and we kind of explained it together, and it was funny. But honestly, the big takeaway for me was that it was a saying. It said, all the force of will you will ever need is found in the art of letting go. And that brought back to my memory one time, this old saying I'd read about the samurai said that on the field of battle, when a samurai draws his sword and throws his scabbard away, it's because he'll never need it again. Wow. On that day, he's free to fight his best. Mm-hmm. And that's how we should live every moment of our lives. I don't care what it is we do for a living. That has nothing to do with it. It's just we should always live with that much passion, that much abandon, and just trust that in living right, the right thing will happen. And we usually don't see this until we're, so maybe either down and out and have no choices, that we're humbled. And in that moment of humility, we're living right. And then, the phone rings or somebody comes by, some magic happens to kind of save our bacon. But I'll give you one small example. I had a very stressful job before my crash. And I would come home and literally I'd have like a rum and Coke. And you know what? If it felt good, I might have 2 or 3. And I didn't start drinking until I was 37 years old. I grew up a total teetotaler. But, my wife was getting a little concerned. I was, it's okay. But obviously it's something that I'm not an alcoholic, I don't believe, but it was still something that wasn't good. I mean, nothing really good comes out of your mouth when you get drunk. Well, while I was laying there in the hospital recuperating, it's as if God took out of me the representation of alcohol, and it was suspended in the air in front of me. He said, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to take it with you, meaning into your future, or do you want to leave it behind? If you want to take it with you, I will carry it for you. meaning I have to consciously be aware that, he's in the room. He said, but if you want to leave it behind, I'll remove all attachment to it. It will have no hold over you, and you can just walk away. I said, leave it behind. He said, all right. And literally it just disappeared. I haven't had a drink since. Don't ever think about drinking. I can go to a liquor store and buy a bottle of wine for my wife. I could sit there while she has a martini. It's something other people do, but not me. That's what I'm talking about. You can absolutely let go of these things. And so when people have asked, well, what is it about that your experience that could possibly benefit anyone else? I've reflected on that a bit more and said, I'm starting to suspect that when we're born with everything we need to be happy. We don't need anything else. We just don't need junk piling into our lives that prevent us from being happy. And so that fits with my NDE of removing the things in my future that are to my detriment. And I think that a big part of adapting that practice, say if you took that visual and brought it into your meditative space, it would be something that, again, requires being present, or it helps be present. It also goes right back to what you and I were saying about premonitions, in terms of sort of like feeling all the spider webs that are coming out from you that represent those possibilities. And then whether it's by humbling pain or whether you can actually see it, you start to intuit better what of these choices works with making me a better person as I understand it today, that are in tune with my spiritual truths. And if they don't, have a conscious exercise of removing them. And from that removal, you'll simply forget them. Opportunities exist for people who see them. That's why 3 people can be in a room and they're all seeing different things going on. So the only opportunities at the end of the day we want to see are the ones that make us better people and help us assist other people in becoming better as well. And a lot of times that's just getting out of the way.
I love that. I love that. I would love to pull a few cards. Are you open to that?
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see what Spirit has to say about all of this. And I love that whole thing about the alcohol, because again, I feel like cellularly I was transformed when I had my out of body experience. And when I came back, I mean, I literally could not eat the food that I was eating before. I cannot drink the things I was drinking before. I mean, I don't drink for 3 years now. I mean, granted, right, mine was 15 years ago, but I was still very much, it took me almost 15 years to really understand what I experienced, and the more that I got in tune with what feels better, it just fell away. Like you said, I don't think about it. I don't care if anybody drinks around me. It's just nothing. And I was never, I might have 1 or 2 glasses an evening. It wasn't like it was ever something that was a part of my life, other than it was just a habit that I was in. And then, but wow, when I let it go, I was like, wow, I feel so much better. I never have a hangover or a headache or, so it's just amazing when you're in tune and follow what feels good, that's
the art of letting go.
That's right. That's right. Well, so this is kind of what I'm getting, is that this is really about, kind of, again, the before and after NDEs. And so the first card, which is always the blockage card, is radiance.
Oh.
And so I feel like, for many people, what happens is when they have an NDE, their radiance can fully shine, because we've been so, what is the word? I just get kind of like this avalanche of societal pressures and beliefs and, everybody's good intentions of telling us who we are and why we're here and what we should do and shouldn't do. And we lose our radiance of who we truly are. But when we go onto that other side, we're bathed in it. We are our true radiance. And so then when we come back, we're able to, really feel that.
That's great. That's spot on.
And then, so the action card is gratitude. And once again, I think I always say gratitude is the rocket fuel of manifestation. And so again, those of us that have had these experiences, and even those of us that haven't, those that are listening that haven't, it's all about gratitude for your life and what's working. And even when things aren't going right, just saying, wow, this isn't what I want in my life right now, but I'm grateful to have it show me what, the contrast, so I know what I do want.
It's beautiful. And actually today when I was driving and thinking about our time today, the gratitude card came up in my mind.
Oh,
And
that's
and
great.
for me, that is especially meaningful because gratitude comes from a humble heart. And we should
Absolutely.
always, always, even though there comes a time in our integration of our experience to our life when we just don't seem to fit in anymore and we're taking some bruises. Sometimes the ego defends itself by saying, well, I've been chosen. Well, yes, you have, but don't get too big for your britches. And I think it's very important to say, sometimes it can be a solitary path, doesn't always have to be lonely, but it does make you feel humble.
Absolutely.
And that is the attitude and that is the spirit to always embrace our accelerated path we've been put on.
That's right. Well, I love what you just said, because the outcome card is sanctuary, which is really going within. And like you said, it's not a lonely path, but it can very much be a solitary path once you've had these experiences, because you have everything that you need and you don't need anyone else or any other people's thoughts or opinions of what's going on, because you're tapped in, tuned on, and know that, like you said, when we're born, we have everything we need and want. And so it's a matter of, when you've had these experiences, just that remembering, remembering that
Absolutely.
that we have everything we need.
It's great, isn't it?
It is so exciting. Well,
I'm pumped up now.
Yeah, right. Is there any final, either story or anything that's coming to mind that you want to share with the listeners about this experience?
Another saying came to me a while back and I wrote it down. It said, it went with that, about the art of letting go. And it said, for no one, it said, always live life in celebration of the individual spirit. For no one and no thing can stand before the brilliance of a truly naked soul.
Beautiful.
That's all I got.
That is gorgeous. Amazing. Well, thank you, Jim, so much. Is there a way people can get a hold of you if they'd like to continue this conversation?
Sure. And thank you again, Lisa. My email address is just my name. It's jim@jimbruton.com. And that Bruton is Bruton. And my actual NDE experience is at my website, and it's www.inbetweenproductions, and that's with an S.com, inbetweenproductions.com. And you can read my account there. And there's also a contact page. If you press contact, pops up, and you can just share a thought with me and hit send, and I'll have your email address and I can reach back to you if you want. Happy to correspond with anybody about anything. And that's about it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, what a joy to talk with you. And I so appreciate your time. And I just love that who you are and what you're doing in this world. And thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And likewise, you're doing great work there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.